I think it would be that somehow, some way, Orlando Brown takes a step backwards because that you're kind of basing the improvement of this offensive line on Orlando Brown handling his business at left tackle. And there's nothing to suggest that's going to happen. Um, you know, I just that would be my one fear is, Kansas City wasn't going to pay what it was going to pay, and it said, we're okay without him. The track record is what it is. You got 4 straight Pro Bowl nods. Everybody thinks highly of him. It was a great signing. He looked good in camp. There were times that Trey Hendrickson owned him, and so did Sam Hubbard a couple times. But some of that's camp stuff. All the players, when you talk to them about him, are really praiseful of what he can do and does. I guess that would be my only real fear is, I guess you could argue, do the 2 safeties fall flat on their face and can't replace Bell and Bates? I don't think that's going to be the case. Are they going to be Bell and Bates? Not in week 1, maybe not in week 2, but I think as they evolve together, you're going to see them get better as the season goes on. So, yeah, I guess that's my lone fear. I don't have many fears. It's a really good roster.
Yeah, I think with the Orlando Brown thing, if you look back to last year, everyone was like, La'el Collins is such a huge, massive get. He instantly upgrades the offensive line. He makes them so much better. And then you get to the season, it's like, well, yeah, he's better, but he's not really what we thought. So I think that concern with Orlando Brown is legitimate, even though everyone's saying, oh, he's such an upgrade. He makes the line so much better. And in theory, yes, he is better than any player they had last year, but it doesn't always quite work out the way you think when you get him into the mix or whatever. And we saw that last year. So I think that's a legitimate concern. On the defensive side, for me, it's not like I don't think these guys are going to be bad in the secondary or there's going to be a ton of miscues. I guess the bigger concern there is I think the strength of the defense the last few years has been the continuity and the fact that they had that kind of people call it bend but don't break, but it's more, we're going to make you run a ton of plays to get into the end zone. And eventually you're going to screw up before we do. That's the concern is, do they have that same level of that same threshold of we're not going to screw up for 12, 14 plays on defense. You eventually are. Well, now do they screw up? Sooner before the offense does, and they don't get that big turnover in the red zone, or they aren't able to force the field goal in the red zone like they have so many times over the last few years. Do they just lose that little bit of an edge because they don't have as much continuity and the same guys that have been together back there so long?
Yeah, I think having 9 starters back helps, but that's a good point. I remember a piece I wrote, I think before the Kansas City game about the fact of how these guys had all been in the system together, and especially Bates and Bell, how they're able to disguise so many things. And because, everybody trusts everybody else, Lou was talking about this yesterday of, he feels good about Nick and Dax, but he said, Jesse and Vaughn had unspoken chemistry where Vaughn would know if a guy's coming across that he doesn't have to say anything to pass the guy off, knowing Jesse's going to be where he's supposed to be, and Vaughn can take another responsibility. And so that trust factor that comes into play. But I do think having 9 guys with that continuity helps. If it was 3 guys or 4 guys and you're mixing in a bunch of new dudes, then I think I'd be worried. But I think the fact you got 9 guys that have been through this system a bunch together is going to be a big help.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm like super confident about the defense. That's not really a big concern for me. But if I'm looking for something I'm trying to find, it's like maybe because they did seem to force a lot of timely turnovers the last 2 seasons. I think Bell and Bates were a big part of that. Maybe they'll lose some of that. But again, that's me really grasping for straws in terms of trying to find a hole in this team.
No, that's a fair
I don't
point.
think there are one.
I think it's a fair point. Yeah, like I said, the guys I interviewed for that story last year were really good in talking about how the trust factor and they know each other, knows what each other's doing, the communication between them, and they were able to really disguise a lot of stuff. You'd see Bates walk into the box, and then all of a sudden it's Von Bell blitzing, and Bates is dropping back real quick. And it's not just doing that; it's the timing of doing that and knowing when you're supposed to drop and when you're supposed to come and not show the quarterback too early. Just little nuanced stuff. And they were so good at doing that.
And the trust that Lou has in those guys, knowing they know how to do that. It's like, well, do you get a little less risky or a little more conservative with these guys because they don't know each other as well? That's the small stuff that is like, we won't find that out until we're playing the Chiefs and whatever that is, week 17, yeah. So, but we'll see how it all plays out. But